Man, I just love winter so much right now. Look at that. No internet. And the fact is there is a raining free storm outside right now. So there's these chance here that my power will just go. So either way, welcome back everybody. Today we actually had ourselves here a lot of changes, mostly dealing with projectiles here. So this actually is super applicable to things or to people who play cannon builds, rocket builds, scorpion builds. All of you bad boys are going to want to look at these changes here because they may have absolutely huge implications to the actual kind of design of cars right now. So let's go over it real quickly. But first things first, it's kind of hard to really visualize what we actually mean by all of these words here. It's not really super clear, man. I mean, you could sit here, read it, kind of get an idea for it, but honestly, really easy and a lot faster for me to explain it just by going over in a really crude drawing here on paint. So we got the side profile of a car here, just kind of laying some groundwork here. This is more or less supposed to be the absolute center of your car. So this is where you put your fuel barrels, your generators, your module packs, whatever it may be. Jets generally where you're going to stuff it right into the core where it's optimally protected. Beyond that, we also got ourselves little spaced pieces of armor here. So this is supposed to be a piece of armor. This is supposed to be a piece of armor representing approximately 1 meter or about 1 cube in the game. And just for this example, let's say that each one of these parts here has only 10 points of durability, kind of reflecting that it's a very light and fluffy build. Now, I should also mention too that generally cars are not structured like this where they're perfect onions with armor spaced exactly every meter. They're generally going to be the case where there's going to be some gaps, where there is going to be some air, where there's actually going to be no parts whatsoever, and is meant to just physically space apart your car. Because as it currently works in the game right now, if you were to actually go ahead and fire a cannon shot, say you hit directly on the side here, as what would happen here, it would directly kill these two parts generally 2 meters into your car, regardless of how much extra damage you have left over. So say the cannon shot here has 50 PTS or 50 points of damage that it can potentially do here, even though it can only go 2 meters, it can really only effectively do, quote-unquote, 20 points worth of damage here because after 2 meters, the shell's lifespan is completely gone. It can't penetrate any further. It explodes basically on contact with these skirt armor pieces. And that's kind of how it works in the game right now. And that's why a lot of builds, including some that I make, generally tend to have things that we like to call skirt armor, or in the case of developers here, calling it screens. So what that actually does is it makes it so your interior of the car is way more protected from cannon shots when you have all this extra skirt armor here, because they're basically going to have to chew through this until it actually gets to your meaty core where they actually go ahead and start doing your damage. Now, if you're a shotgun, machine gun user, or anyone that uses consistently damaging projectiles here, this is not really that much of a concern for you because, well, skirt armor, if it's big chunky pieces or big light pieces, you still got to do roughly around the same amount of damage anyway because there is no penetration to your shots. But for cannons, rockets, scorpions, this is a huge detriment because they can basically block a lot of damage, making them, quote-unquote, less viable in a way, but they've also compensated that with a way with extra explosion radius, extra damage, and the scorpion case, I mean, it penetrates quite deeply anyway. So what are the actual proposed changes here? Well, essentially now, there is no longer that 2 meter limit where they can actually go even further beyond what is already currently established. Now, what does that actually look like here? So say, again, in this case, we get hit by that lovely cannon round again, and the side still has that same 50 points of damage. Oh boy. So instead of it just going perfectly hitting these two parts and that's it, it's done, and actually will continue further into the car and actually attempt to take out more of these parts until it reaches its 50 HP threshold here. So in this case, it will take out 5 of these parts here in the absolute optimum scenario, assuming you only have armor parts here that are, 10 points of damage and are basically evenly spaced behind that car. Now, it doesn't take further account into the fact that a projectile may explode and leave a gushing gap inside the car, or it may not actually account for unique weapons like the Scorpion that basically indefinitely penetrate. And it may also have just differences in armor part. Well, why would you want to do that? Why would you do this in a way that heavily increases the effectiveness of cannons against these skirt armor builds? Well, as it currently stands, skirt armor is basically the meta to go for if you want to actually have increased survivability against these cannon shots here, because otherwise, these cannon shots, if they get close to your weapons, if they get close to your vulnerable bits inside your car, they can do massive amounts of damage here. It was not very long ago where a cannon shot could basically hit the core of your car, and your car would just instantly disintegrate because it would hit your fuel barrels underneath your car, it would hit your generator, it hit an ammo pack, and boom. or it would hit your weapons on top of your car, and boom, those would be gone instantly because the damage of these projectiles was, you know, when you're doing 2 or 3 of them at a time, could be in excess of 200, 300 points of damage. Slap that onto a weapon, congratulations, you just lost a quarter of your weapons with this extremely large explosion radius that may be, you know, a few meters in some cases. But in this way, what it actually allows, you know, the more effectiveness against skirt armor is that it necessarily makes it so skirt armor and regular old thick armor are now in the same league. So in the case of, say, instead of this being 10 points, say each one of these parts was now in the case of, you know, say 50 points. This makes it much more likely that if a cannon shot was to actually hit here instead of the point having just the 50 points of damage straight up, instead of penetrating further into the car, it would just be immediately stopped by there. That is unless you have the 88 Executioner, which is specifically designed to penetrate. So instead of it doing, you know, all 100 points or 50 points of damage, it maybe would do like 25 here, and then hit the one behind it as well, and do about half a damage of that as well, assuming this is also 50 points here as well. So in that way, it just kind of evens out the playing field between thick armor and very spaced out thin armor. It's at least based on what it can actually read here. You also have to take into consideration that if you're actually testing this on the server right now, is that some of these actual balancing haven't had happened yet, because as it currently stands, if these changes go in just straight up and they haven't adjusted the damage values or explosion radius on any of these actual shells or cannon shots, the effectiveness of these things just goes through the roof. These things would be absolute monsters on the battlefield. You basically completely negate shotguns and machine guns as really effective forms of weaponry here. And it should also be noted too that just because a projectile can take out, you know, 5-6 meters worth of very light armor, it doesn't necessarily mean that it actually will take out all those armor, because the projectile itself is still going to have an absolute lifespan based on the distance from first contact or first explosion. So instead of it just being like a 2-meter lifespan, some of these projectiles may have a 5-meter, 6-meter, 7-meter lifespan, or in the case of the Scorpion, an infinite lifespan, but, you know, lessens depending on the durability here. But again, they still haven't gone through the balance changes here, so that increased penetration with the already existing damage numbers, explosion radiuses, and things of that nature, this means that these guns will be highly effective on the test server, unless they've managed to actually change that pretty recently here too. But I can see this being an absolutely fabulous change, because right now, the fact is, the meta is supposed to be these very light, very spaced out armor sets here to make your cars extremely wide, but very robust against cannon shots. So by reverting to changes more like this, people's more dense, you know, thickly armored pieces here will do a lot better, and should hopefully be less vulnerable to things like cannon shots, or at least as effective. But beyond that, they also included some few minor changes here to the Amori, the Avalanche, and then the actual Tackler itself. So go ahead, test those out there if you'd like them myself. But beyond that, I actually think there's going to be absolutely great changes here. Love the direction here. Would love to see more kind of tank-like builds going in here. But to be fair, I kind of ignored the meta of doing skirt armor for quite a while now, because I really didn't like the look of skirt armor vehicles. I still have quite a few of them in my garage, but you know, at least now you get some more aesthetic builds here probably coming out here pretty soon. So let me know what you guys think about this down below here. And if you guys are also interested in helping the Crossout team go ahead and test this, feel free to go ahead. There's going to be a link to the news down below here. You can go ahead, download the test server. I'd recommend installing it onto a separate hard drive than what your current game is. So if you have a C hard drive where your core game is, install it on the D hard drive or whatever letter it is after. But go ahead, give them some tests, and then they're going to have also a thread as well in which you can give some feedback. So definitely be very appreciated here. Or if you just want to go in there and do some PvP modes, that is also very helpful. But go ahead, let them know your thoughts and opinions. But other than that, I think we shall call it good here. So I want to thank you all again for watching my lovely video, and we'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.